Hello, this is David Crowell from Mortgage Network, and this is Money Matters. We're back for the second half of the show, and I left off with a brief kind of overview of what the bond market has been doing during this most recent period. The bond market seeks yield. So yield and price are inverse to one another. If you imagine a $100 bond, mortgage bond, or treasury bond or treasury bill, a $100 treasury bill that someone buys at a coupon rate, at an interest rate of, let's call it 4%. So they're willing to buy for $100 a bond that returns 4%. Okay, so if interest rates in the community for 10-year treasuries go up to 4.25%, then their bond is worth less because they're holding a bond that only returns 4. If interest rates in the community go down, or in the trading community go down to 3.75%, then the value of their bond goes up because they're holding a bond that returns 4%. So in simple terms, you buy it for 100 with a 4% return. If it goes up to 4.25, then your bond may be only worth $94 or $95. If interest rates collapse to 3.75 and you're holding a 4% bond, then your bond may be worth now $103 or $104. So it's an inverse relationship. Think again now about the 10-year. And the fact that only last summer, the U.S. 10-year, which dominates the interest rate conversations in all of mortgage rates and all of the real estate-related interest rates, it was as low as 1.8% 12 months ago. Today, it's 2.92%. That's a massive increase. If you calculate that as 1.1% increase over the 1.8 that it was at, that's about a 1.175. That's about a 70% increase in the interest rate over the last year, over the 10-year. That indicates that's a great indicator of what's happening to interest rates. If we breach 3%, the high likelihood is that we'll see mortgage rates, which have currently gone from 3.75% last summer to 4.625% last night. When I left the business last night, I'm recording on Friday morning, February 23rd, first thing in the morning. Now, last night when I left, rates were at 4.625%. Last summer, they were at 3.75%. What does it mean to you? It means that on a $100,000 mortgage, you are paying approximately $100 on a $100,000 mortgage. You're paying approximately, let me do the calculation in my head, 900. You're paying approximately $85 a month more for the money. For a $200,000 mortgage, you're paying $160, $170 a month more for the money. So it is reaching the point where you can begin to feel it, you can begin to see it. It has not reached the point where it has slowed the mortgage business down or slowed the housing business down. Housing is in short supply. Housing is continuing to slowly but surely increase in value and increase in price. The reason is that our area continues to be a growth area, and there's a shortage, a net shortage of housing versus the number of people coming into the area. This is most profoundly felt in the rental markets, which continue to be 100% occupancy. Their rental property, as soon as a rental property becomes available, there are 10 people waiting in line to rent it. The equation between fair market rents and prices of houses and the corresponding mortgage payment plus taxes plus insurance on an equivalent house remains very favorable. In other words, you can buy a $200,000 home at the moment and pay the mortgage. This is at 4.625%, and pay the mortgage and pay the taxes and pay the insurance and pay the little HOA fee, and you are still on a $200,000 house. That bundle of costs is still a couple of hundred, somewhere between 200 and 300 less than it would cost you to rent the same place. But the gap is narrowing, because as the money becomes more expensive, the gap between rental housing and purchased housing is narrowing. I have some good friends who are real estate developers on the rental side of the equation, and they are developing some large rental properties, several hundred units each, in North Charleston, just outside of Charleston, South Carolina. Takes an enormous amount of effort to do one of those developments. Takes years in planning, years in getting the correct approvals, and a massive amount of money needs to be borrowed to put such a deal together. However, the demographics and the analysis that goes into such a deal is predictive. Why would somebody be building hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of apartments if mortgages and the cost of mortgages is still low enough so that that's a favorable transaction? In other words, you can buy cheaper than you can rent. Why would my very, very intelligent friends be investing 50 or 75 or $100 million doing these large apartment developments? Well, the answer is that this is not going to last for long. Housing, the lower end of the housing market is too tight. There is not enough housing. There's not going to be enough rental housing for a very, very long time. Enough housing per se, whether it's houses or rental property. First step housing in the form of apartments is traditionally the entry point for the housing market. We've become accustomed during this last 5 or 6 year period of many, many first-time home buyers moving more or less directly from college or from parents' homes into first houses. It's been a favorable time for that because interest rates have been so very low and our housing mortgages require extremely small down payments. We're returning, or we will be returning, to a more traditional housing market as rates go up. The cost equation between renting and housing will narrow. Renting will become not such a bad proposition as people like my friends start supplying the market. And you'll return to an older housing model where young people will begin their journey in a rental place for 3 or 4 years, save a deposit, move into a first home, and so on. One of the very interesting things that's also going on is that the housing market really is unimpaired by finance. In other words, there's no block, there's no restriction in the housing market based upon finances at the moment. It remains open-ended as far as getting the money to buy a house. Very favorable. The problem is supply. And over the coming weeks, we'll talk a little bit about the supply side of the equation and why it's become such a problem. Have a nice week, and we'll see you next week. This is DCrowell signing off for Money Matters.